It's been a very tough week, a very tough weekend for everyone in Ukraine. And when we had technical difficulties in the beginning, I wanted to share with everyone that we had a conversation this morning, whether we should even do this, because nothing, it's very hard to concentrate. It's very hard to get your thoughts together after what we witness and still are witnessing now. But we decided still to do it.
100%. And just to say, I don't know if it's worth sharing this or not, and I'm obviously in a privileged position to be able to do this, but the reason I dropped off in the beginning, I got a no caller ID call, and it was my doctor here in the UK calling me, because the first thing I did this morning when I woke up was just acknowledge the effects that this weekend and the images that we have seen have had on me. And I just decided that I really needed to look for some help. So I just, I think some of you who are on here who follow both Maksym and I, between Maksym's post about Ukraine's official application to join the European Union and my post as well over the weekend around, the fact that people shouldn't silence us when we are sharing photos of the atrocities that are happening in Bucha, you can pretty much probably feel how we feel right now, or try to understand how we feel right now. But I think for me, clearly this is a space I'm just feeling a lot of different emotions right now, but every time I close my eyes, even like for a second or blink, there's one particular photo that I just can't get out of my mind. Like, I've seen so many by now, but there's one that just is just, it's just so present in my mind, and is not letting me go, that I just feel, I just can't imagine what these people went through, and it just hurts me in a way that I don't think I've ever heard. But Maksym, sorry.
No. I mean, I understand, and a lot of people find it uncomfortable. Imagine how we find it. It's not that we want to share it for likes or for retweets. It is just we're in this extremely weird and denigrating position that we're still need to ask for solidarity and need to ask for people from outside Ukraine to intervene. I would never wanted to share or see anything from it, and the only reason I amplify, because we're put in this position when we need to beg other people to be more proactive. Because what is happening now, and I hope everyone starts calling it what it is, genocide. What is happening now, this genocide is happening because of all those years of basically allowing Russia to do what it always does, loot and rape and attack others.
Yeah.
And I think at this point it has to stop. And if we're paying terrible price for it, and I share something that I cannot share much more because it relates to my family, but some of my family members are trapped on occupied territories. And what is happening in Bucha is happening in many other places. There are going to be so many Buchas still ahead of us.
Yeah.
So people have to be prepared, and so it doesn't go further, we have to act now, and you gotta press whoever you can in terms of your representatives, using your platforms to make sure that Ukraine gets what it asks at the moment.
100%. And if you don't mind me, I just wanted to read for everyone who is here in the meantime a tweet. I know we usually amplify Ukrainian voices, but I think the voice of Kimberly St. Julian Varnon is really important right now as well. And I wanted to read Just quickly before we jump into the interview, her tweet around the violence that we have seen, which is that violence like this doesn't come from negligence. It's part and parcel of concerted Russian dehumanization of Ukrainians and domination executed through armed terror. Negligence erases that each murder, each rape, each act of torture was a decision made. Just so everyone remembers. And I'll pass back to you, Maksym.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, we're now ready to transition to our featured Ukrainian of today. And we wanted to take some time to talk about Ukrainian queer community. As a queer Ukrainian, I get still a lot of requests every day trying to, from journalists, from regular people, trying to figure out what is happening to Ukrainian queer community and how people can help. But also, it's becoming a bit frustrating because a lot of requests from journalists that we get about the stories of queer Ukrainians, they have a very specific lens that many queer Ukrainians find a bit frustrating or concerning. It is something that we've been dealing even before genocide started, and it always involved a kind of a victimizing lens, like poor queer Ukrainians running in terror. And this kind of victim labeling is something that is now has a bit of distorted view of what is happening and how queer Ukrainians are dealing with genocide, how they pushing back against it. So that's why we wanted to invite someone from my own KyivPride family, Edward Reese. He posted recently a fantastic video I'm going to be resharing again, where he basically explains what is wrong with foreign coverage of one specific issue of struggles of transgender Ukrainians at the moment. But before we go into that, I wanted to invite him to just maybe share a bit information about what he does. It says this is your place, you claim it, and you use it as you want. Yeah, but please, there are no obligations. Share about yourself, whatever you feel appropriate to share at the moment. And, maybe for those folks who are joining us, just to introduce yourself, how you've been dealing recently with what is happening and what's your work these days is like.
Yeah, my name is Edward Reese. I'm a trans non-binary person from Ukraine, from Kyiv. I'm an activist and a blogger, and I'm working for KyivPride for a year. My work at KyivPride before the invasion, the last invasion, was administrative work mostly, making events and speaking on behalf of the non-binary community. And now all the KyivPride team is definitely shifted everything, changed everything what we do. And we are working mostly to help people in different spaces, different places, in different ways. And as Maksym said, one of the biggest things that we do right now is actually informational war, because KyivPride is like the most visible organization in Ukraine, and we are constantly getting requests from different international media about how LGBTQ people are struggling. And, they are asking this particular question every time. How are you struggling? So how are you suffering? They don't even give us an option to tell how we fight, or how we long for peace, or how we want to rebuild our country after the war. They ask about suffering. So that's why I guess this negative face of the situation for queer people is created, because they start with this even, so they don't have any other options.
And tell me about that video that you decided to film. And I know that it's, it's much more, the explainer is much more popular on Instagram and TikTok rather than on Twitter. But what forced you to do it? And I know that KyivPride also put out a statement about all the misinformation and all misreporting that is happening when it comes to transgender Ukrainians and their struggle and there are issues that they are facing in Ukraine. So, can you also explain a bit about that? What was that?
Yeah, there is actually several stories, particular stories of trans women who left Ukraine, and I don't know if I can tell the name of the person, but I guess if you are following these stories about a Ukrainian war, queer people, I guess you read this story because she was telling it to different media several times. So there is this story in which this girl tells that Ukraine is a hell for trans people, and that she was struggling and trying to get help or something, or to get out of Ukraine for a long time, and that she was subjected to involuntarily get into the psychiatric hospital because of the transness, and many, many more other things, including actually her story of getting out of Ukraine through the border, which included several crimes that she committed. um, so, and she described the situation with trans people in Ukraine. The way it looked, actually, I don't know, like we are in some really, really undeveloped country, that we are something like, I don't know, Afghanistan now, or something like this. Because she said about the psychiatric hospital, she said that trans people can't change their documents in Ukraine, and many, many other things. And I am a trans person, being in the procedure of transition right now. So I was actually planning to do my top surgery in Ukraine in March. I got all the money for this. I got the communication with the doctor and so on. But like the invasion came, Russians came, and I actually had to get out of the country because I need to get this surgery as soon as possible. And I'm now trying to do it in another country, in Sweden. And being this person who goes through everything she described, I know that she is lying. Because the transition process in Ukraine is not the way she says. It's much easier. And in fact, it's like much easier than, for example, in Denmark, where I am now. And it's much easier than in other countries of Europe and in some states of USA. So I really wanted to show that we are not the hellish place that some people describe Ukraine to be. Because, there is really this pattern that queer people in Ukraine are victims.
And, you mean the foreign coverage, right?
Yeah, in the foreign coverage, for sure. And when we understand that people want to see some hot stories, some stories to cry for, and so on. But the thing is that when these stories come out and people read them, people start to discuss them, it doesn't help Ukraine at all. It actually does worse, because I heard that, for example, some stories, some organizations in Italy, Germany, I guess, want to be telling correctly, that they decided to stop helping Ukraine with donations or some support because of these stories, because they heard that Ukraine is cruel to trans or queer people.
Yeah. Well, we cannot also ignore that there is informational war is happening against Ukraine, as probably these kind of narratives sometimes are being used and abused by Russia to, again, reinforce these disinformation narratives about Ukraine being a Nazi state, Ukraine being a horrible place for everyone. And I feel like exactly these kind of stories are being exploited for the same benefit. Although there is no point of denying that there are problems for some people who wanted to cross the border and couldn't because of various legal issues. And we've been all involved in the cases like that, and we're trying to be of help as much as possible, because you cannot sometimes expect from the country at war to be super responsive, excuse me, super, efficient when it comes to bureaucracy. But for a matter of fact, we know that the government is even cooperating with us on those cases, right?
Yeah, actually, the thing is that we have this martial law, which denies people with male passports from 18 to 60, right, getting out of the country because they can go to the army, and definitely it touches some trans people. It wasn't my problem because I still have female in my passport. I am just in the process of transition. But it touched some trans men, some trans women. And definitely, like, I guess we can't judge the country which is in the state of war to making some martial laws because, well,
Of course.
it's the war. But many organizations in Ukraine, including KyivPride, Insight, activists from RFSL, Swedish organization, we all are working together to help people get the proper documents as soon as possible, and not like get the proper like female or male documents, but get the certificates that are needed to cross the border and everything. And there are many cases which are really successful. But the thing is that also, like, as I said, a trans person in Ukraine can change the documents if they are following all the steps of the transition, if they have all the needed certificates. Many of the girls who are struggling to leave the country right now, they actually could get their documents before the war if they took care about themselves. It may actually sound like victim blaming, maybe, but I sometimes don't understand why people are not caring about their own life. Because it's like to change your documents is to care about your own life, to finish your transition legally, and to live your happy life as a woman.
Yeah, of course, wherever the situation was, that of course probably at this moment this is besides the point. But yeah, the main message is that it is possible, right? It is possible even now in these situations when we have martial law. We're still in talks with government officials, and they're still responding, and they're trying to do their best despite what is happening. And I hope that all those people who are still stuck and still want to leave, no judgment there. I'm not in Ukraine myself, but
Yeah, that's
it will take some time. But we won't definitely abandon them, and we are working through this situation together.
Yeah, definitely we are. And right now there are several shelters in the western regions of Ukraine, which are created by the organizations like specially for LGBTQ people. And KyivPride is also helping in the shelters, and other organizations are doing really, really hard work to maintain everything there. So there are many people who are staying in the shelters. They are safe there and they get all they need. Definitely, like in the situation that we all are in. And I know that many people who left the country, including me, are still working for Ukraine. Like I am working for KyivPride remotely, and being here in Denmark, I'm taking part in the street protests to help explain Danish brands that they have to get out of Russia and that people have to support Ukraine. And I know many other LGBTQ Ukrainians who are volunteering in other countries, who are working with to help other refugees from Ukraine, and many more. So some of us are fighting in Ukraine, like the whole bunch of LGBTQ soldiers.
Well, that's actually what I wanted to ask you as well. Edward, I wanted to specifically ask you about the stories of Ukrainians, queer Ukrainians who stayed and who fight, because they're, at least in my circles, there are majority of them, people who haven't left, people, openly queer people who are now serving in Ukrainian army or territorial defenses units, so-called Pride Brigade, and you can follow the hashtag to. We try to share as many of their stories as possible. Again, regarding security concerns. But these are kind of stories of defiance and fight that I feel like sometimes are missing when it comes to coverage of queer people in Ukraine. And I do appreciate all the requests and all the desire to bring light to queer community and other disfranchised communities in Ukraine, how they're handling through the war. But these stories, I feel like, still get less attention, don't you think? Especially when it comes to our openly queer people on the front lines.
Yeah, actually, I also saw this, and I guess it's also like some part of this the colonial mindset, because some people want to see us struggling but not fighting. And that's why the story is about really like unhappy queer people from Ukraine are more required, more popular than stories of the soldiers. But there is also this issue that you mentioned, that many of the soldiers don't have time and possibility to give any interviews or something like this because they are fighting.
Also security concerns. I mean,
yeah, and the security concerns, and but KyivPride is following the people that we know, and we are constantly posting information about them, their stories, their pictures on our social media pages. And one of these posts was reposted by the official account of Ukraine in social media, and it was really popular, about several LGBTQ soldiers and fighters of territorial defense and volunteers. So we really hope and we believe that after the victory, we will be seeing, in fact, less homophobia and transphobia in Ukraine, because these stories of defenders are helping people to believe that queer people are not like something awful or something like this. And also, we have this narrative in Ukraine, which is provided by some groups that call themselves far-right groups. They are trying to tell, they're trying to push like this propaganda style messages that all the LGBTQ people and organizations are leftist and pro-Russian. for somehow, I don't know how it works in their minds, together, leftist and pro-Russian. So I actually found one of these articles which featured me several days ago. One of my followers on TikTok sent me this article, which explained, like, right now in the middle of war. This article featured several LGBTQ activists, including me, and said that, well, you see, the LGBTQ people are leaving the country, they are running away. And as for my story in this article, it showed a screenshot of several videos on my TikTok, which were, these videos were about my top surgery here in Denmark and Sweden. It's like my main topic in my TikTok, transness. It's the things that I'm talking about. And they said in this article that, you see, this person left and he doesn't say anything about the war. But if you scroll one row before, I have around 30 videos about the war in Ukraine. And the same thing about everyone, because there are still people in Ukraine, unfortunately, who are trying to condemn others, who are trying to create some conflicts inside the country, who are trying to spread homophobia and transphobia and xenophobia as a whole. But I really hope and I believe that after the victory, no one will be listening to them.
Yeah, and I wanted to actually, this is a very great point. I want to, for others who are, especially those who for the first time hear about this topic, I want to give a bit of perspective and deeper background on this, because Ukraine had been going through a tremendous decade of fantastic success when it comes to expanding of equal rights for queer people. And as a person who remembers the first Pride that we had in 2013, and how we were just basically 50 people surrounded by hundreds of police, and then surrounded by hundreds of extremely aggressive people, were just walked, I don't know, 50 meters. And now, flash forward to 2019, the last Pride before the pandemic, when we had more than 10,000 people, completely peaceful celebration in a Ukrainian capital, with a very large group of openly queer veterans and military people marching side to side with us. I just, sometimes I feel a bit sad that this war basically endangered all that progress that we had. But once I think about it, I always see this fantastic support and understanding that we now experience from all sides, celebrating queer fighters, openly queer members of the army or territorial defense, coming from members of the parliament, coming from the president himself. And I do also hope that this kind of moment of unity that we have, which is unprecedented, especially for me as a queer person, to experience anything like that, when people do not really care whether you're queer or not, everybody just cares about being Ukrainian at this moment. I really hope that stays past this genocide and something that we can preserve. I don't know what you think about it. Maybe I'm too hopeful at this point. But yeah, do you think it's something that will stay with us?
Yeah, actually, as I said, all the KyivPride team and other queer activists, we are working our bodies and minds out right now, because there are so many issues that we have to solve with helping people. And we're really sad that I guess we won't have the Pride March this year. We were This time, like in April, we had to already start the preparations for the 10th March of Equality in Kyiv. But I know that this war right now, this stage of this 8-year war, is not only the war for territory or people or something. It's the war for our values. It's the war for Ukraine being a part of the modern world. It's the war with the enemy who is in the deep, deep past. And in some kind of, like, I saw one post yesterday about Bucha, which said that it's worse than the Middle Ages, than the Dark Ages. So we are fighting the Dark Ages right now, or even something worse than Dark Ages. What I see now is like Ukrainians are the people who want to move further, and moving further in the development of the country and the nation is definitely it definitely contains the human rights, because there won't be any development without working with human rights, without rights for women, for LGBTQ people, for any other minorities. And I know that after we win this war, I definitely believe that we win this war, we will be rebuilding not only the destroyed cities, not only the houses, we will be also rebuilding the society. And there is a great amount of hope, I guess, that our society is already being rebuilt. I see all the people who are switching from Russian to Ukrainian. I see a great amount of people who are denying the Russian culture, so-called. I see a great amount of people who are stopping to watch, follow Russian bloggers or Russian pop stars. And I really believe that all this tragedy which happens right now, which is unveiled right now when the Russian troops are getting out of our cities, this tragedy will teach us that we have to take care about ourselves, that we don't have to look at the way of Russia never again. That we have to forget Russia. We really hope, actually, like I personally hope, that Russia will stop existing after this war. That maybe it will be getting to several small countries or something like this. I don't know. But I know that Ukraine won't let Russian culture, Russian values ever again to our life. Yeah. And it's, in fact, already the great step forward. Just because all that we had, if we look at our past, all bad and dark and tragic that we had in our past was connected to Russia, to Soviet Union, to Russian Empire, and now to the Russian Federation. So when we get rid of everything like this, we will be able to grow, rise like a phoenix, and rebuild our country totally free of this darkness.
And I'm so grateful for you to saying that. And listen up, folks, because I'm also so proud of queer Ukrainians being at the front line and at the front of this decolonial struggle for Ukraine. And this is something that people oftentimes miss, that in these narratives about the Ukraine and the talks about Ukraine, I want to double stress something I always say. Queer people have been putting their lives on the line during the 2014 Maidan massacre, and queer people died there for free Ukraine, independent, without anyone telling us what to do. And queer Ukrainians, even in larger masses, are now giving up their lives and putting their lives on the ground to fight off a colonial oppressor in this war and genocide as well. And I think, as a Ukrainian, as a queer person, but everyone in Ukraine probably will be also forever in debt for everyone, including queer Ukrainians who are doing that. Valeria, I know you also had a question or two.
I do have a question, and it's a question we usually ask all of our wonderful guest speakers. And Edward, I wanted to ask you as well, and I know you've spoken a lot about this already today and in general, but we usually ask this more philosophical question, and you were talking about values and things like that, about what does Ukraine mean to you personally, and what is sort of the Ukraine of the future that you want to see?
Well, looking at the last weeks, I guess, I won't say right now that I see Ukraine as a country with European values. I said it before, being asked this kind of question, but right now I see that I guess there is no such thing as European values. Because we see the protests with Russian flags in Germany. We see many strange things these days. We see Meta, Instagram, Facebook banning pictures from Bucha. And I guess Ukraine in the future after the war for me is definitely the country which follows human rights, which follows equality, which is the country with its own bright, prominent, unusual and unique culture. What we actually see right now, Ukrainian culture during this war, is blooming because people are making new songs, people are creating great art connected to the war, definitely, but it's great pieces of art, of literature, of music, and so on. And definitely Ukraine won't be a colony anymore, because everyone in Ukraine right now is understanding that it's not the way we want to go, it's not the way we need. Because before, I guess, there was a great amount of people in Ukraine, not the majority, but there were many people in Ukraine who wanted to be the colony of Russia as we were in the Soviet Union and before that. But now, I guess, during all these tragedies that we see by our own eyes, many people understand that being a colony of Russia is death. Many people understand that being a colony of Russia is not a way to grow, not a way to be free people, and not a way to survive, actually. So, definitely will be a totally independent country, and we will have our own great culture. And what is Ukraine for me personally is first the place that I was born and the place that I was raised and lived in Ukraine for 36 years. I miss my homeland a lot, despite that I'm being like in one of the most beautiful and modern countries of the world right now. I really want to go home. And I'm a great fan of Ukrainian folklore. I was a part of wonderful theater projects based on Ukrainian folklore several years ago, and I want to see the country that will be loving and praising the past that we had, which is not connected to any colonization. That will be loving our own folklore, our own, I don't know, magic, our own stories, and everything like that. And for me, Ukraine is this beautiful, angry girl with long dark hair and dark eyes, which has weapons, which has bruises, and which is really strong, and who has great desire to defend herself and to fight any oppressor.
Yes, thank you. And also to channel Edward's words, because we got to wrap it up right now, but to channel that this is something that, as we try to decolonize our conversations about Ukraine and misconceptions that foreigners have about it, we're also on this journey together inside the country. Even I talk with my parents every day, and they're people who were born during Soviet rule, and now they're just reevaluating, the majority of their life and what they saw and things that they wouldn't even clock or realize at that point about the cultural domination, about how they were treated as second class people all the time by Russian colonial rule. This is something that a lot of people in these horrible circumstances, but still reevaluating. And the great thing that we don't have to look up to anyone anymore. And Ukraine set its own standards. I know it's a running joke that NATO should join Ukraine or EU should, make application to join Ukraine, but this is a joke that is 100% rooted in truth. So yeah, thank you, Edward, so much for today. It was such an honor to host you, to give you a platform, to claim it the way you wanted to claim it, and talk about things you want to talk. I wanted to ask you just at the end to maybe share any platforms people should follow. You personally, our KyivPride family as well, on Instagram, TikTok, how people can follow you and learn about your work every day.
Oh, I guess as for my personal pages, it would be hard to pronounce the login because it's strange.
I will share. It, then everything. Your personal pages and KyivPride, which is much easier. But yeah, maybe something else you want people also to pay attention, follow hashtags or any conversations.
I guess that you really have to follow KyivPride because we collect everything that is important for Ukrainian queer people right now, like the donations, the programs, the help that we provide, and all that we do. We have a wonderful media team consisting of 2 people. Oksana and Maksym are like really gods right now, doing all that they do in this time. So I will be, I guess we'll be sharing everything. And what we need is all help that you can provide. We are talking about this informational help and informational war. and we post all the statements on the KyivPride's pages in Twitter as well. And it would be wonderful if you repost it, if you show it to people that are still showing some colonial views on Ukraine, because right now every repost, every comment counts on this hybrid war that still exists. And we will be hoping that you will follow us and looking at all that KyivPride does, all that I personally do, is
Yes.
really the resources to know more about queer Ukraine.
Yeah, Ukraine is beautiful, queer, non-binary, independent, and it needs your help to amplify all these truths at the same time to make them louder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It was amazing experience.
Valeria, yeah, maybe you can help us close it. I do feel much better. You know, these sessions, they always work a bit like therapy sessions. We always come much darker and we leave in a bit more light from it. So thank you, Edward.
Yeah, and it's just so important, I think, for everyone to hear how amazing Ukrainian voices are and how diverse and different our perspectives are, and how we're not, just a homogenous group of the same people, but we come together with our differences and fight together for a free and independent Ukraine that has the necessary tools for us to keep fighting for our rights and the rights of people who are important to us. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you both, Maksym and Edward, and I look forward to our next session.
So thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Героям слава.
And thank you, folks, for joining. Talk to you soon, okay?
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.